Hello everybody, it's your boy Fatty, coming at you with a tier list for Ragnarok Origin Global coming out this year. With CBT set to start Q1 this year and launch to come soon after, you want to know what you're getting into with each class. And if you're coming in with a guild, you want to make sure your guild is prepared to have a proper team comp in order to be competitive. And don't worry, that's where I got you. With the help of multiple people who still play Ragnarok Origin to this day and have gone through multiple iterations of route, we'll be sure to guide you into the right direction. But before all that, do know that more specific guides will be coming out depending on demand. So if you want a up-to-date, specific to your class guide, make sure that you leave it in the comments below and that you subscribe and you hit that notification bell. Now you may notice on the screen here, we have our RO Origin tier list, and we are going to be sorting these with multiple criteria. We're going to be sorting it with scalability, so you know if your class is going to be relevant late game or when your class is going to be relevant. War of Imperium, probably one of the most important events in the game currently, along with our 40v40, which is also one of our categories. And then 5v5, which early on, before War of Imperium launches, will be one of the most prominent PvP modes in the game. And MVPing, especially since you want those MVP rewards, because as we go later into the game, those cards do make the biggest difference. And also, not just that, but we also want to determine if a class is free-to-play friendly, if it's something that big spenders want to invest on, ease of MRing or monster research, which is actually very crucial to scaling your character, and last of all, leveling. If you want to make sure that the class you're choosing is good at leveling, is not as dependent on getting boosted, then you might want to pay attention. Let's start with scalability. Probably the subject that everybody is very curious about, because nobody actually wants to play a class, gear it up, only to find out later on that maybe the class requires a lot more investment than you initially thought, or maybe the class just isn't that good. Speaking of which, we're going to start off with Lord Knight. Now, Lord Knight is a bit of a trap. Performs really well early game, which does impress some people, especially. But the thing is, Lord Knight just doesn't excel in anything. Its scalability is horrible, and the only thing that it has going for it and maybe looking forward to is possibly third job. Maybe Rune Knight will give it Dragon Breath and maybe it'll be better. Who knows? But as of right now, it is gonna have to land in C tier. It is useful in absolutely nothing late game. And now second we have on the list is Paladin. Paladin, this one's easy. Scalability, Paladin is gonna have to be S tier. Next up, we have High Priest. High Priest, when it comes to scalability, it's probably one of the best ones out there. It's a very easy decision for me to put it into S+. There's really no contest when it comes to it. There's no debate, nothing at all. Absolutely, S+. Next up is Champion. And we'll go into detail after we complete all of the lists that we have to complete. And I'll explain it more into detail as to why Champion, who used to be, I would have to say, like labeled as like the best free-to-play class, because it was a class that allowed you to kill whales. But in terms of scalability, after certain events, it went down from S+ to S. We're gonna have to put it in S here for now. And again, I'll explain it later as to why. And next up we have on the list here is Wizard. Wizard, this in terms of scalability, whether you're free-to-play, whether you're investing heavily into it, it's gonna have to be S+. And next up is Sage. As for Sage, this one is very easily S+ as well. And next up on the list here, we have, let's see, Sniper. Sniper, as much as I love ADL build, and as much as I love Sniper as a class, it just doesn't get up there as much in terms of scalability. The thing about Sniper is that, and I would put it in B tier in terms of scalability, it's too squishy. Honestly, it's the squishiest class in the game. It has the lowest HP scaling in the game at around level 115. Its auto attacks for ADL build does become quite strong, comparable to like Dual Dagger Assassin. But the fact of the matter is that it still has less dodge than a Synex. It still has less mobility than a Synex. It still has less escape than a Synex. And it's just squishy. It's very vulnerable, and I would not advise people to roll this class unless you're investing heavily into it. And even then. Alright, so next up we have here Bard and Dancer. Now there's a distinct difference between these two, and we'll get into that later. But as of right now, in terms of scalability, I'm gonna have to put both of them into S tier. All right, so Bard and Dancer S tier when it comes to scalability. And let's see here, I have my list here for Mastersmith. Mastersmith, when the game first started and we were only around like the level 100, level 90 to 100, it did look pretty good, really good actually. And now it's just good, not really good, just good. So we're gonna put it in A tier. All right, in terms of scalability. And next up, we have biochemist. There's a reason why I put this one. I would put the scalability in A tier. And then after that, we have our assassin cross. Assassin cross, when it comes to scalability, and you'll find out why soon, is because it's gonna be S plus. There's a grueling process that puts it up there to S plus, and you'll find that out later. But there's no debate in terms of scaling. Synex, hard to argue against it, honestly. And then Rogue. Next up is Rogue. As annoying as Rogue can be in PvP, in terms of scalability, I would have to put it under B tier. So we're done with our scalability, and then our next category is War of Imperium. And again, I'm really sorry to all the Lord Knight fans out there. You might have played ROM and they might have been very strong, but in Ragnarok Origin, Lord Knight is, for War of Imperium, C tier. And again, that may or may not change. I'm hopeful that it will change because I am a fan of Lord Knights. Maybe when third jobs come out, Rune Knights get Dragon Breath, but as of right now, it's gonna be a C tier, unfortunately. And next up, Paladin. We're gonna have to put it up to S tier. And the reason why I put it into S tier is because it's essential in War of Imperium to ensure the survivability or prolong the survivability of your carries, right? But it's not the carry itself. Let's put it that way. And that's why I would put it under S instead of S plus. And next up we have on the list here is, again, High Priest. If you're a fan of High Priest, you're gonna love Ragnarok Origin because High Priest is, again, for War of Imperium, S plus. Easily. And then the next one we have here, again, is War of Imperium, our champion. It's gonna have to be A tier, mainly because its job in War of Imperium is to focus like tanky targets, maybe like the random ones or twos that get past your AoE line, or defending your Imperium room, but they're very singular in their purpose. All right. So next up we have Wizard. I mean, if you played RO1, you've played any type of RO before, War of Imperium, Wizards, easily S plus. All right. Next up in our list here is Sage. I mean, you guys probably saw it coming. You played RO1, you played previous iterations of RO. In Ragnarok Origin, it's the same. S plus. And next up is Sniper. A lot of people who are fans of R1 might think that, hey, this class pretty good in WoW. Lots of traps, all that. But unfortunately, the ankle snare days of snipers in R01. In Ragnarok Origin, there's no such thing as ankle snare, unfortunately. Even with sharpshoot, even with the currently existing traps, I'm gonna have to put Sniper in B tier. There's just so many other classes that can do its job a lot better. The next class we have is our Bard and Dancer. Obviously, Bard and Dancer, in terms of War of Imperium, if that's what you're into, is going to be S tier. And next up, Mastersmith is going to be A tier as well, alongside Champion, because Mastersmith serves kind of the same purpose as Champion. If you're a Mastersmith, chances are you're probably not gonna want to dive into the enemy stack. You're probably gonna be wanting to defend your wizard line, your back line, in case any ones or twos randoms get through your AoE line and you want to protect your back line, or you want to protect your Imperium, and that's why it's on the same tier as Champion. Next up, our Biochemist or Creator also fulfills the same job as Champion and Mastersmith. It's gonna go straight into A tier, right? And then next up is our Assassin Cross. Now, Assassin Cross, this one's a little difficult because unless you're incredibly good with a class, and I mean, you know proper positioning, you know when to take opportunities, and you're very, very geared. See, I would put Assassin Cross, even somebody who's geared, I would probably put you around maybe C tier. C tier in the beginning. And then when you get your red cores for Grimtooth, whenever they come out, all of a sudden, Assassin Cross, S plus. All right. And then next up, we have our Rogue class. They kind of fulfill the same role as Champion, Mastersmith, and Biochemist in War of Imperium, where they're just very annoying and they target singular targets most of the time, and they try to stop the random ones and twos that get through your AoE line. So they all four of these serve the same purpose, and that's why I put them all in A tier, because they serve one purpose, but they serve that purpose very well. Okay, so our next category, which is the 5 versus 5. Chances are this is going to be the PvP mode that is going to be the main focus before War of Imperium is launched. So I decided that this was going to be very important when it comes to making this tier list. Firstly, Knights, I mentioned in the beginning, early game, they can be very strong. Before Champions come out, they're definitely pretty dominant, I would say. And even when Champions come out, Harry does block Asura. So it's always like a bit of a gamble when it comes to like surviving an Asura as an LK, but there's a chance that you will. And it's a pretty high chance at that. In terms of early game, I would have to put Lord Knight. I would say like Lord Knight's probably S tier early game. But again, as I said in the beginning, in terms of scalability, it'll soon go into C tier. There's just a lot of other classes that with the same investment can perform way better. And that's why I put Lord Knight into C tier. Next up is Paladin. Paladin, when it comes to 5v5s, absolutely essential. If you have your one hyper carry and your paladin is tanky enough, let's say it's a heavily invested paladin, for example, with devotion, if you can't kill the paladin and you can't kill their hyper carry, you don't have much of a choice. You're just gonna have to try to tickle him, or maybe you're gonna be trading kills as a champion trying to Asura, if you can kill him, that is. And that all depends on if they implement the HP buff in PvP modes, which is kind of an indirect nerf to champions, unfortunately. And the next class we have here is High Priest. Now, Magnus, maybe not so hot, but full support, absolutely full support S+. Whether it's having your High Priest cast Aspersia on you so you do more damage, or just the buffs in general, or if you have a pretty wailed out High Priest and they can probably heal you to full in like one heal. If you have a Paladin, for example, that can't be killed by Asura, and then you have a High Priest that heals for like over 100-200k and starts healing him back to full, that's kind of an instant win. And then next up we have Champion. Now, I did mention possibility of an HP buff when it comes to PvP, but in terms of 5v5, whether it's trying to kill the hyper carry or trying to kill the other members like the priest, for example, champion still does a wonderful job of taking them down. And if a champion is strong enough to kill the paladin that's devoing their hyper carry, you could trade 1-for-1, or if you're quick enough with it, you can kill the paladin by assuring the hyper carry, and then you can body relocate away. Just really all comes down to skill at that point. And next up we have Wizard. For 5v5, the thing about Wizard is really good if you're turtling, especially if your wizard has good enough gear where their gravity field really hurt and the enemy team can't push into you. The problem with that is that you have to land your AoEs, and if you're not trying to do AoEs, use bolts instead, which honestly Sage does a much better job of doing. So I would have to put Wizard in the A tier, which is probably the lowest the Wizard will ever receive in this tier list. Next up is Sage. I mean, this one, I already spoiled it when I described Wizard, but Sage, those bolts hurt, man. AoE, they got LP. CC, they got webs. You know what I mean? So it's pretty easy to say that like Sage is just gonna be S+ tier. Sages are just very strong as a class in all stages. Next up we have Sniper. Now let me clear this up. I will rank Sniper as A tier in 5v5s. Now let me explain why. The reason why I put Sniper on there as in A tier is because they do a lot more than Lord Knights. An ADL Sniper is very scary, especially earlier into the game when not everybody has anti-fear on their helmets or their headgear. ADL, fast attack speed, with fear cards on, you just can't even play the game. So the scariest part of 5v5ing and having a Sniper on the other team is if they have a smoky card, they hide, and they pick and choose their targets. And if you reveal yourself too early and you blow your cooldowns on another member, for example, he's just going to focus your squishy, and that squishy is just going to get feared and he's not going to be able to do anything. Mastersmith does counter Sniper, but if the Sniper fears the Mastersmith before that, the Sniper is going to win, especially a geared Sniper. And next up is Bard and Dancer for 5v5. I'm going to have to put these guys in S tier. It's very hard to really kill a Bard and a Dancer, because the one thing that makes them strong in team matches like this or even large scale is the fact that with the proper cores and the proper gear, these guys can heal, AoE heal with Eden's Apple up to like 100 something K, possibly more if you're geared enough for it. But from what I've seen, Eden's Apple healing 100k and it's AoE around him, some pretty OP stuff. And next we have the Mastersmith. Mastersmith I would have to put into S tier. Now let me explain this when it comes to 5v5. Early on, in the early levels, blacksmiths, they do tend to struggle a little bit. They feel like they don't have enough damage, for example, and it does get quite hard to kill somebody who's semi-geared. But once they become Mastersmiths, especially around like level 90 to 100, specifically 100, they do kind of show their ability to be one of the best, if not the best, frontliner class. And yes, that's unfortunately for Lord Knights, that's way better than Lord Knights, because the tankiness that they have, plus the damage that they're able to deal, plus the buffs that they give to their team when it comes to 5v5, especially your Synexes with your dual daggers, it's pretty hard to argue against a Mastersmith in terms of being S tier when it can offer more way more than Lord Knight can ever offer. So next one we have for 5v5 is Biochemist. Biochemist or Creator, I'm gonna have to put him in B tier. Thing with Biochemist is there's quite a huge delay in between them throwing their acid demo, and as soon as you throw that acid demo, you just kind of just have to back off because there's really nothing you can do after that. And one thing to note about acid demo is it actually is shorter range than Synex's Rimtooth, so that's something to think about. So the main issue with this class is pretty much like high cooldowns. Despite those high cooldowns, they do actually have one of the best bursts in the game. So as much as I would like to put it in C tier along with Lord Knight because of the long cooldowns that you have to wait in between acid demo throws, he's actually quite a bit better than Lord Knight, and so we'll put him in B tier for now instead of C tier. All right. So next up we have our Synex. I don't want to bait people into this because let me make this clear right now. Synex is S+ tier, but it requires a lot of investment. I'm going to make it clear right now, and I'm going to reiterate that later on as well. Assassin Cross is definitely the most expensive class to gear up. The exchange for that is the fact that they are going to be one of the best godly PvPers in the game at the cost of however much you have to spend to make him effective. I would say, and I don't want to spook anybody, if you want to play Assassin Cross for fun, maybe you just like the class, maybe you just like wielding dual daggers and attacking really fast. If you're going to play Assassin Cross, I would say be prepared to spend at least maybe 15 grand USD in order to see some results. Otherwise, it gets a little tough because not only do you have to invest a lot into it in order for it to be S+ tier in like 5v5s and all that, you also have to build the right build. Because if you don't, then you're going to be wondering why you die so fast, and you're going to be wondering why you can't kill as fast. Because there's a very thin line between a good Synex and a bad Synex. But once you get it wrong, you're not going to see the results that you expect to see. And it's something that requires a lot of experience. One of the best Synexes in NA, for example, Can't Find Them. He's somebody who has played Synex since multiple iterations of the game, and he's able to perform masterfully with the class. But there have been other people who have even invested the same amount, or if not more, or have similar gear that have not been able to come up with the same results. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking of investing into Synexes. All right? I just want to warn you in advance because I don't want anybody to get baited into it and be disappointed when they get further into the class. All right? That's what I'm here for. I'm here for you, okay? Next one. For 5v5s, oh man, Rogue. I know we've rated Rogue not too high so far, but when it comes to 5v5s, Rogue is S tier, S+ tier. The ability to completely remove somebody from the fight and make them want to uninstall is crucial in a 5v5. Rogue can do that, so Rogue goes to S+. All right. Okay, so in terms of 40 versus 40, which is a PvP mode that kind of comes later into the game. I'm not sure how early they're gonna release it, but when it comes to 40v40, Lord Knight, let's get it over with. C tier, unfortunately. It's just, I can hear the sobs of Lord Knight lovers and Lord Knight mains. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't decide the game balance. I had nothing to do with it. I like the class, but it's just a non-factor. Unfortunately, it doesn't scale. It does a lot of things that other classes do just so much better that it's just gonna have to be in C tier. All right, so 40 versus 40, Paladin, no doubt about it. You have your hyper carries. You want a Paladin in there, S tier, easily, right? So High Priest comes to no surprise, S+ tier. Even free to play High Priest, as long as they're active and they have semi-decent gear, even the priests that get one shot, if they have resurrection and they're able to res people to keep fighting, or they're able to cast Numa to counter Synexes, to counter snipers, or if they cast safety wall to counter champions on their hyper carries, for example, even a free-to-play priest will be a huge factor when it comes to winning in 40 versus 40 and every part of the game for that matter, right? So always just expect High Priest to be S+, and that's just that. Next up, we have Champion for 40 versus 40. Champion, man, I would have to put Champion in S+ when it comes to 40 versus 40 because the other guilds probably have 1, 2, or maybe 3 hyper carries, and having a Champion that can help take them down as soon as possible so they don't kill any more of your members so you can occupy the points is very crucial. So no debate, Champion S+ tier. Even if they can't kill them instantly, if they contribute greatly into killing the hyper carries with devos on them, that's already a win. So next up we have Wizards. When it comes to 40 versus 40, Wizards, I mean, this one's a bit of a no-brainer. S+, absolutely. You have little circular points that you're trying to take over, limited space, you have wizards. Let's say like you have like geared wizards. You put a grab field in the middle there, and then people are forced to step into it, and they just die. And that's how you easily take a point, right? So next up is Sage. Now Sage, oh man, Sage is a crazy class. Sage is easily S plus tier. Sages with Devo on them, sages that are very decently geared, they can put a lot of hurt into people. And not only that, they also have land protector. So guess what? Wizard, ME priest, you guys are trying to carry with your AoEs on the ground, and guess what? Little old Sage just kind of like stops by the point, puts an LP down, and bolts you to death. What are you gonna do? Absolutely nothing. Respawn, I guess, right? So next class we have is Sniper. Oof, Sniper. Sniper is actually pretty good. I would put Sniper in A tier. Snipers are pretty useful in 40v40. It is a bit of a mess in 40v40. Snipers, sharpshoot snipers that are incredibly geared, probably offer like one of the biggest bursts in the game. And it definitely has a lot more range than Biochemist. And it definitely has a way shorter cooldown than Biochemist. Yeah, Sniper's squishy. Put a Devo on him, right? Put a gear like Paladin and Devo him. And all of a sudden, what do you got? You have almost like an unstoppable like hyper carry, right? That's why Sniper is A tier. It's just, the reason why it's not S tier or S plus tier is because there are more classes that carry harder, even if you're really geared. If those other classes up here have the same gear, they will and they can carry harder than you. And next up is Bard and Dancer. Bard and Dancer, as you can see, support classes. They might not be the carry fantasy that people usually like fantasize about, but as a support class, they are very effective and they're very essential to a party. Bard and Dancer, easily S tier. Next up on the list here, we have Mastersmith. Mastersmith I would put in A tier. They are one of the best frontline classes. They can break gear and they do have good burst, but in this huge mess where everybody is just focused on dealing a lot of damage. As a Mastersmith, if you get the jump on them, sure, yeah, you can kill them. But at the same time, it's such a huge mess that the biggest factor you have in contributing to your party is probably joining the party with your most geared Synex and buffing them up. It's not what I would want for Mastersmiths. The fact of the matter is they're A tier when it comes to 40 versus 40. And next up is Biochemist or Creator. Same thing with 5v5 earlier. They're really good at dealing huge amounts of burst, and they are kind of free-to-play friendly. So if your guild is short on other essential classes and you have a biochemist who may not be investing that much, but you know at the very least he deals a huge amount of burst regardless of like how much he spent. So I would have to put Creator, Creator, I'd have to say B tier. And the second to the last one we have is Synex in 40 versus 40. Again, you probably figured it out from how I described it with Mastersmiths earlier and all that, but Synex, PvP gods, S+. And when it comes to Rogue really likes to make people's lives miserable. He may not be the hyper carry, but he can disable your hyper carry. Rogues can give you CC that is longer than your buff bar. So I would have to put them in A tier because they do play a very crucial role when played correctly, but they're not as essential as, let's say, like a Paladin. They're not as essential as like a Bard and a Dancer. They can't hyper carry like these 5 other classes up here. So for 40v40, gonna have to put them in A tier. And these next two, I'll just do 2 of these in one go, which is free-to-play friendly and spender's best investment. More bang for your buck, pretty much. Like for the people who want to whale, for the people who have money to blow, I will rate those in terms of tier for you, okay? So pay close attention. I'm gonna do free-to-play friendly first on the same class, and then I'm gonna do spender's best investment tier next. Here we go. Lord Knight. Oh boy. Okay, Lord Knight, when it comes to free-to-play friendly early game, yeah, it's free-to-play friendly early game, but it's like I said in the beginning, it's a bit of a trap. It falls off really fast. Even when you spend a lot on it, it's still gonna be C tier. So my apologies. Okay, let's go towards Paladin. So free-to-play friendly, I would say B, because obviously in order for you to be an effective Devo Paladin, you kind of need to be geared. But at the same time, having a Devo is better than no Devo, so I'm not going to put it in C tier when it comes to free-to-play friendly. When it comes to big spenders tier, it goes up to S tier, because ensuring that your hyper carry survives is very crucial. If they can't kill your hyper carry, your Synex, your Sage, your Wizard, your ME Priest, there you're just gonna wipe the enemy. regardless of what PvP mode you join. So having a very geared paladin is pretty crucial to winning any game mode that you might want to get into. Up next is High Priest. When it comes to free-to-play friendly and investment wise, both categories, High Priest will always be S plus tier. The reason for that is with heavy investment as a support, you can heal a ton. You can heal 200,000, 300,000, like huge amounts pretty much, right? But when it comes to offensive carry, you can also be Magnus. When it comes to Magnus, I believe the highest kill record in War of Imperium in North America belongs to a Magnus Priest, because it's very hard to ignore Magnus. The only thing is, like, you need at the very least a plus 15 weapon for Magnus to ignore magic defense. The good thing about lights in this game, actually get Holy Light early, which helps with your leveling a lot. In terms of leveling, it's better than going your attack speed, your bonk build, your attack speed build. Before your Magnus comes online, you can actually sanctuary undead mobs. There's a few good spots to do that, and that also speeds up your leveling. So regardless if you're free to play or pay to win, you're always going to be performing, right? You're always going to be relevant. There's nothing you can do that will ever make Priest or High Priest irrelevant when it comes to early, mid, or late game. So the next we have Champion. This one is pretty easy. Regardless of like the HP buff that happened in NA, even if it happens in global, it still takes a while for whales to get to a level where they can tank an Asura full SP from a champion, even a free-to-play one. As long as that free-to-play is like active and has like proper gear for free-to-play, Champion still goes up in terms of free-to-play to S+. When it comes to investment-wise, it does go down to S, and the reason for that is because if you took that same big investment and you put it into another class, there are classes that can carry harder than a champion, because even a whaled out champion can only kill so many at a time, and that's why I would have to put it down S, because it's still going to be very strong. It's just not hyper carry mode. Next one we have is Wizard. When it comes to free-to-play friendly and vendor friendly or investment worth, I would have to put them both into S+, right? S+ because a free-to-play Wizard will always be relevant. Even in War of Imperium, you could cast level 1 Stormgust and help freeze enemies. Even with a free-to-play character, Wizard's still going to be relevant because Gravity Field is just going to do a lot of damage still. When invested into or invested heavily, your grab field is just gonna one shot a lot of people, or even for some whales, like it'll 2-3 shot them, like 2 ticks, 3 ticks. It's pretty insane, and they're surprisingly tanky with safety wall spam. And next up we have Sage again. It comes to no surprise, free to play or investment wise, Sage is going to be S+ tier. The reasons are obvious, right? You want CC, you have your web. You have playmaking, you have your land protector, you can block AoEs, right? You can nullify a grab field from a geared wizard and have that AoE deal no damage, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And that only becomes more pronounced when you invest heavily into a Sage. Once you invest heavily into a Sage, with how crazy Sage bolts are, you're just gonna start one-tapping people in rapid succession, and you're still gonna have access to all your other skill sets. So it's just, it's crazy. It's crazy how good Sage is, and I'm happy for them, right? I'm happy for Sages. I'm glad that they're that strong. It was a class that everybody was looking forward to, and I'm glad it delivered. Next up, we have Sniper. Now, Sniper, free-to-play friendly Sniper, C tier. I hate to say it, but it's gonna be down there with Lord Knight when it comes to free-to-play friendly. It only gets bumped up to B tier when it comes to heavy, and I do mean heavy spending. I love ADL build. I like seeing fast attack speed, but unfortunately, Sniper is just not that good. Having the lowest HP scaling in the game, it's rough. So unfortunately, I would have to put it into B. Next up is Dancer and Bard. Man, free-to-play friendly, it would have to be in B tier when it comes to free-to-play friendly, but it does jump all the way to S+ tier if you invest heavily into it. A well-geared, heavily invested Bard or Dancer does wonders, does absolute wonders for 40v40, 5v5, War of Imperium, doesn't matter. They're huge difference makers. So when you want to invest heavily into one, if your guild has one, then it puts your guild in a really good spot, all right? So next up we have a Master Smith. Oh boy, Master Smith, it's not for people who are going free to play. when it comes to free to play, it's gonna be C tier, unfortunately. It does go up to A tier with some investment. They are the best melee AoE frontline. They can be quite tanky. Once they catch their target, there's a huge chance that they're gonna be able to kill them. And not only that, they also can break gear. They're always in demand for their buffs, especially with Synexus. And the next one we have here is Biochemist, or free to play friendly. I would have to put them in A tier because yes, the cooldowns are long, the range is short, but because of the mechanics of acid demonstration, you still do big damage to people who are just like tanking, like paladins, people who are like quite geared. You can always be expected to do a good amount of damage even if you're a free-to-play player. And not only that, when you're leveling eventually and you're leveling in like tanky mobs, creator is gonna do a pretty decent job at that. And next up is Synex. When it comes to free to play, C tier. If we had an F tier, I would put it in F tier. That's how much I don't recommend free to play players to play Synex if you want to be competitive, if you want to be relevant. But when it comes to like investment, like heavy investment, without a doubt, Synex goes to S plus. There's just no debate. There's just no debate about it. And next up we have Rogue. Free to play friendly is going to be B tier. When it comes to investment into it, if you like Stalker, and you're gonna be very happy to say to see that it does go up all the way to S tier. All right, so we're down to the last part, which is going to be, I was going to put a tier for the monster research, but when it comes to leveling and monster research, they kind of go hand in hand. There are some slight differences. So Lord Knight, when it comes to MR and it comes to leveling, both C tier. I'm sorry. Next up is Paladin. When it comes to MRing, it's going to be C tier as well. But what's surprising is, because of Shield Boomerang, it actually goes up to A tier. The caveat is that you're spec for Shield Boomerang, and that actually does help you grind quite fast. Next, for MRing, one of the probably the faults that High Priest has is when it comes to MRing is, yeah, it actually is in B tier, because either you have a Mistress card and you can do ME all day every day, or you want to invest heavily into blue gems, which if you get Freya's in global early on, which we didn't get in NA, then yeah, maybe you probably will have the money to bump this up to like S or S plus tier even. When it comes to MR, I would have to put it because you're most likely going to be going like the punk build, the attack speed build that I talked about earlier. Actually does really well for sustain. You won't need to use any potions because you have heal already. You have your self buffs already, right? And when it comes to leveling, from the get-go, even before you get your Magnus, you are already at S plus when it comes to leveling as a High Priest. You'll be happy to know. So next up, we have Champion. Champion for MR, I would have to put it in B tier. When it comes to leveling, I would have to put in C tier for leveling early on. When you get to level 100, when you get the proper weapon for finger offensive, when you get the proper red core for finger offensive, I would say that your grinding goes up to A tier. Next up, when it comes to MRing and leveling, Wizard in both regards, S plus tier, easily. A Wizard can farm triple spots easily with grab field. When it comes to MRing, that's really good, because chances are the mobs that you're trying to farm are probably going to die in one tick, which is really good for MR and obviously really good for leveling as well. When you one tick or you kill a triple spot fast, obviously lots of MR, and obviously fast EXP. That's it. S plus Wizard. And obviously when it comes to Sage in both MRing or leveling, without a doubt, don't even have to wonder, S plus tier on both. Now Sniper, when it comes to MRing and leveling, finally gets quite a bit of a break, especially with your sharpshoot build. Really good for MR, really good for leveling as well. Sniper finally catches a break and actually gets put into S plus tier. Next up, we have Bard and Dancer. Bard and Dancer, I would have to say S tier for both MRing and leveling as well. Just to make it clear before I go into our closing statements later, one of the biggest differences between Bard and Dancer is the Bard has Braggy's Poem, which is very helpful to casters, and Dancer has the crit buff, which is obviously very helpful to crit classes. The key thing I'd say that puts Bard and Dancer in like S tier is that together, the both of them have the skill that increases your EXP multiplier. So when it comes to boosting, let's say like your party members or your friends or your guildmates, and you want them to level faster, having those two will be quite good. All right, so next up we have Blacksmith. So Blacksmith, ease of MRing. I would have to say they're in A tier as well. They have good AoE, they have good damage. When it comes to leveling though, I don't think they're that fast, so they're gonna have to go down a tier with B tier when it comes to leveling. And next up is Creator. Creator, when it comes to MR, I believe should be C tier. And I mentioned earlier that when it comes to like tanky mobs, Creator does do good burst, but again, they can't kill as fast as like a high priest or a wizard or sage or sniper, and they're limited by their long cooldown. Creator will have to go to, surprisingly, A, right? Pretty good at that. And the next one we have when it comes to Synex. Synex, ease of MRing, high dodge, don't really have to invest much into potions, decent damage for mobs, especially small mobs. If you're doing when you're doing Dual Dagger, which you should be early on, I wouldn't have to say they're B tier, right? The only thing is they tend to level slow, even if you're geared, until you get Grimtooth and the red core for Grimtooth. Your leveling is at C tier. When you have Grimtooth though, your leveling does end up skyrocketing in between S tier and S plus tier. Right? And the more investment you have, obviously the more effective it'll be. Okay, so this may come as a surprise since I usually rate melee classes lower when it comes to MR and leveling, but with the Holy Bow build, Rogue stock actually goes up to not S plus tier, but I would say S tier. It can't quite clear as fast as like ME Priest, Sage, or High Wizard, or Synex with GT, or a sniper with sharpshoot, but with Holy Bow build actually does MR and level pretty fast. And that's it. That's our tier list. I hope that was very informative and you guys learned something from it. Again, if you want a specific build for your class, make sure that you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're aware when it comes out, and comment down below, because the most popular class that gets the most demand, I'll be making the guide for it. I'm gonna make it a bit more detailed, and I'll probably start with like, let's say like 1 to 70, and then after that, depending on changes into the game, because I will be playing the game with you guys. But all that is going to be for another video. Again, thank you for watching. It's your boy Little Fatty. I'll see you next time.